Yeah, let's roll. Let's roll, Charles.
All righty. Denny Garcia, how are you?
Good, Charlie. Good to see you and finally get around to doing this little project,
We've been talking about this for how many years now?
Well, in between the regular conversations, foreseeing projects that we can do together because of the nature of our friendship has always produced something neat that's,
I would agree with you.
we love people and food and music and let's start there.
I agree. Tell me about. Let's go back a few years.
Let's go back.
Let's go back 74 years. You were one. You don't remember much about that, but let's scoot it up to.
I have some faint memories.
Let's go to. Where'd you grow up at?
Well, I grew up in Iowa Falls, Iowa, but I was born in Mason City, Iowa.
Okay.
I'm an Iowan.
Okay.
And 1949, April. And I don't remember much about that. I know Truman was president, and he dropped the bomb.
Yeah. What?
Not funny.
When you've had a career and a life of music, and how did that start? You were in Iowa Falls. What did your parents do in Iowa Falls?
Well, my dad was in the Navy in WW2, and when he got out of the Navy, he met my mom and stole her from his best friend, and she was a young farm girl, and they got together, and a lot of great story in there, but eventually Dad was working for the Northwestern Bell Telephone Company.
Okay.
He was a lineman. When I was a little kid in Iowa Falls, I used to stand at the bottom of the pole and watch my dad work up on the wires and stuff. And so he was a telephone guy for a long time, and he worked his way up from the lineman to the top dog in the telephone company. And Mom, she was, at home a lot, and she worked a lot of different things. Went out in the fields and worked, and I'd accompany her out there and detasseling and all sorts of stuff like that. But
you had told me a story about a record store over there. What?
Yeah, well, my teen years come along, and Mom had worked for this older couple in Iowa Falls that had a little record shop down at the main intersection in town. You go down these stairs, and it was a little subterranean shop. And this old couple, a really sweet old couple, they wanted to get out of it, and my mom had worked for them and said, "Why don't you take it over, Pauline?" And so she did, and we started the music shop back then, and we made it a little cooler because we modernized a little bit. And I got to go down to the post office all the time and get the new boxes of albums and 45s and stock the shelves and label them all. And we had a record shop.
What was your interest in music when that shop came to be? Pertaining to, were you into it? Were you playing any musical instruments?
I was already into playing some music. I got my first guitar when I was a kid, and $3.
$3.
I still got it. It's on the wall somewhere. Yeah, old beater. I got it from a friend, but the years, the stories, but. I taught myself guitar, my first chords and stuff. Okay. And I got a book, and I'd wanted a guitar. I wanted drums first, but that didn't happen. And
now, do you play the piano?
Yeah, I taught myself. Well, I sat next to Mom. We had an old upright piano in the house.
I remember you telling me your mom played the piano.
Yeah, she was pretty with it. She played some violin and piano when she was young, and played basketball too and stuff in Mason City. And she was just a great gal, and did a lot of things. But she was very musically inclined, and she could sing. And she sang in the church with a couple of her gal friends that sang for everything, funerals and weddings and whatnot. Beautiful harmonies. Do
you remember telling me the story about the piano playing years ago? and it was about. If I remember this correctly, it had something to do with you hitchhiking across the country, and somebody asked you, Denny, why don't you play the piano? And you said because they're hard to hitchhike with.
Yeah, true. It is true. I tried once, but I had to leave it behind.
Yeah. So you grew up in this small town. When did you leave that town?
Well, I went through high school. I did the normal thing and grew up there. Had a lot of great friends. Nice little river town. Iowa Falls has a beautiful section of the Iowa River flowing right through it, and we had cliff pigeons there, which they eradicated. They're rock pigeons or whatever you want to call them. We call them cliff pigeons, but they made little caves in the side of the cliffs. And I used to canoe a lot and spent a lot of time on the river. And I was a kid. Back then, you could, rent a canoe for a whole day for like 50 cents or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was one of the only kids that would do that. I'd go up all the way to one end and down to the dam the other end and canoe the whole thing and explore the banks. And the river really bonded me to my hometown,
Okay.
And that's why I've always been a river nut.
So the outdoors has always been a part of your life.
Oh yeah, and I like to camp out and stuff. And around Iowa Falls there was a lot of forests also, and stuff along the river that was just beautiful countryside. And you don't know how to appreciate that stuff till you get older and you go away from your hometown and everything, and that's why you return to your hometown every now and then.
Now, you still have your mother's home in that hometown, correct? Your mom and dad's, is that correct? Or
no. Mom and dad split up. When I got out of high school, they were still together, and I went through a year of college at UNI, and they split up during that time, and it was rough, but it was okay. It was just the way it panned out. And Mom moved up to Clear Lake, Iowa, and got herself a little house.
Okay,
that's so what I still have.
Okay, yeah. I got those towns mixed up.
I rent it out, and I stay up there a lot when there's nobody renting it. Clear Lake is a nice, quiet little town, and that's where a lot of musical history came down. Buddy Holly and Big Bopper and Richie Valens. And
Clear Lake's where the ballroom is, correct?
The surf ballroom, yeah. And that's one reason my folks got together, because they love to dance. And once they fell in love and everything, they danced. My mom loved to dance. She used to go see all the big bands at the surf ballroom.
Okay.
The original surf ballroom burnt down one of the nights that my folks were there. Long story there, but yeah, the original one burnt down. So the one that's there now is the one that they rebuilt across, just right nearby.
Okay.
And still going strong. They're going stronger than ever. Actually, it's been.
So you graduated from high school. You went off to college, and when did you start playing music?
Well, I'd already started playing music when I was a kid. The first guitar, the guy I got it from, he got killed. My dad and I were out working in the fields, and Dad was a fireman, and back then, we didn't have cell phones and everything, but we had, you could hear the sirens in town, or the phones would ring at our house when there was a fire alarm. We were out working in the fields, and there was an accident, and my one buddy that was a really good friend, that's where I got my first guitar from, and he was really good when he showed up in town in Iowa Falls with his mother. They moved there and met this kid, and he was just a great kid, and that's where I got my first guitar from. And then he got got in an accident, and it was a sad farewell for a kid like that. Everybody liked him, and he was a good performer already when we were just teenagers. And
so when you were a teenager,
he got me going.
Were you playing in bands or anything like that, or just okay?
Nah,
just maybe jamming at the house, stuff like that.
I taught myself chords and just noodling around on the guitar and how to tune it and get it going that way. I had a melt-based songbook that you could learn all the chords, and teach them one at a time, and make your fingers go there. And I remember when I was a kid, I'd practice in the morning, and my mom would be getting ready in the bathroom nearby. And she said, "Oh, that sounds like a chord." When I get it right,
Right,
she had a
right.
good ear, and so, that sounds like a chord. That's doing it right. So, from the first C chord or something on, you learn that there's those three notes make a chord, make it sound right, and then you're off and running. You keep
Okay.
learning from there, and real simple. Learn one little noodle thing at a time, and
So, when did you start playing gigs in bars or?
it took a long time, man.
Okay.
And I'm not stupid necessarily, but I've done stupid things. But learning music is a challenge for anybody. But I wasn't in the high school bands or any of that kind of marching band type music. I learned on my own, and
Okay.
music came to me in a certain way. Mom loved all the big band music, and we had piles of 78s and albums, and then 45s came along, and uh, yeah, I had a pretty good little collection built up, and I worked at the shop too, and so I get a 145 a week for my allowance, and uh, you know,
Who were some of your favorite musicians back then?
well, before that shop ever happened, I mean, I collected records, and we had mom tortured us once when they were going to get a big one of those console record players with radio, and it was fancy at the time, new technology. She made me and my sister wait down in the basement all day till this thing came and they delivered it. And she wanted to surprise us, so we're down there. But music came to our house that way on a record player, and we spent
Okay.
hours around that record player and playing everything we had as far as recorded music. And
So when you played those records, did you ever play along with them on your guitar and stuff?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I started to learn how to play, and I'd uh, yeah, play along with records, and I learned how to tune the guitar to the record because it was,
As far as what they were doing with their music.
yeah, well, it was all concert pitch
Yeah.
type stuff, which means there's a realm where, well, you're close to where they were playing, um, except for some of the English people. Hey, there'd be half a key off, or anyway, you learn any way you can. And
Okay.
the other buddies that I had in town, there was like only two or three other guys and gals in town that were starting to learn to play the guitar, and so we'd all get together and just sit around and swap chords and teach each other what we knew at the time. And
Cool.
there wasn't much, but you learn from the ground up.
Sure. So when did you leave Iowa Falls?
Well, the folks were kind of on the rocks a little bit, and it was a little rough around at times, but we all got along pretty good and everything. But I graduated from high school in '67, and I thought I'd tackle some college. And so I got registered at UNI. It was SCI at first, and then UNI it changed to, and then I went through a year of that, and then but I had friends that had already gone to Vietnam, and a couple of my biggest bad buddies that were just bullies and tough guys. I mean, tough guys. They're good guys.
Sure.
They're tough guys, and I ran around with everybody because I friend everybody it seemed, but they had gotten back from Vietnam after being there for a while, and they said, "Man, it's not what you think it is. It's that's a whole other story. I don't need to go into." But I was thinking about it, and I talked to my dad about what do I do about the service and stuff and all that, and it was a big deal for me because you're facing college and an education and maybe a career as opposed to just going off to war and maybe not coming back, of course,
Sure.
and all that. And I wanted to serve my country because I grew up that way about
right. Your dad was in.
My dad, and I respected all that, and and it was a poignant part of your life to make decisions about what do I do with my life and what do I believe in and what is this thing I'm getting myself into. or could get into. So yeah, that was a poignant time of life where I was off traveling, but it was time to go, and I'd already registered, and that whole thing was an amazing thing. But yeah.
So you've told me stories about hitchhiking across the country and playing music.
Yeah.
So you've gone to college, and then where was your first gig at? Or how did that come to be?
Well, I got to where I was okay enough to hold chord changes together, and the concept of memorizing a song and then putting it together with music. And then I was also starting to play the harmonica. Was my first instrument that I'd walk along the railroad tracks out behind the farm, and then the boxcars and the freight trains that come by. I'd play with the rhythm of the rails, and the clickety clacks, and
so you like, when did you told me about hitchhiking, you told me about travel in the United States, and
well, okay, all that condensed when after my draft physical down in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I went down there, and I was living in Colorado at the time, and time for my draft physical, and it all kind of congealed around there, where I went down there for that draft physical, and I was, well, this is my fate unfolding. I'm either going to go there, or they're going to not want me, or whatever. And because I told them what I felt about that particular war and how I felt, I said, I'm a good shot. I'm willing to go.
Yeah.
I'm totally gung ho American kind of guy.
Yeah.
But I'd also been advised by other people that had already been there that said, boy, think about it twice, because you do have choices. Anyway, somewhere along there, I'd had certain vehicles and things that I went traveling with when I did that first year of college. I had to get out of there. And I said, that's all I can stand, because if I'm going off to war, then I don't want to dink around in school anymore. I want to go see the country,
right?
Know what I'm fighting for and whatever, and be more sure of what I believe in. And so I did. Whether I had a vehicle or not, I rode my thumb. I learned how to be brave out there, but I got stuff thrown at me. I got surrounded by people that wanted to beat me up, rocks thrown at me. I let my hair grow. And
So you told me a story about playing down in Louisiana or down in New Orleans one time, right?
Yeah.
So how'd you get down there, and what did you do down there? Did you just play music on the streets down there?
Well, that one particular time, that's when I turned 30. It was so a lot of time had passed, but some friends of mine, I painted houses in Cedar Falls and Waterloo and all around that area for some work at that time. And some of us are going to go down to the Jazz Heritage Festival in New Orleans, which is a great event down there in the spring, and tons of performers and great music. And I met some friends that were coming over from Texas, meet in New Orleans, and we did. I drove down there with a couple old just gals that I knew, and some dogs, and a baby or two, and we took a panel van down there from Cedar Falls to New Orleans.
Okay.
And I went down there and met my buddy Russian Sarita, and we met down there in the New Orleans, and it was 79. That's when that happened. And
how long were you down there then?
Well, that trip, I wasn't down there long.
Quick trip?
Yeah, it was a quick trip, a few weeks. And but I played all over on the streets of the French Quarter and everything.
So you told me, yeah.
And it was a great experience, and we went out to the New Orleans the fairgrounds too, where they had the main huge festival that people from all over the world come there for that. But exploring the French Quarter, and the old French Quarter before it was flooded by Katrina and stuff, that was an amazing thing to do. And playing, and both Rush and I had a handle on our guitar stuff and songs and everything. stood on the streets of the French Quarter in front of the cathedrals or Jackson Square or just all around Bourbon Street. And,
you were playing music, but were you singing too at the time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you had to learn how to sing loud on the street when you're playing a lot because there's a lot of other performers out there in the street.
I'll bet.
And a lot of stuff going on, people walking by and everything.
Yeah.
But you leave your cases open and
no electrical anything, so it was all acoustic.
No,
correct?
The cops come by and hand you a sheet of what you can and can't do as far as playing music on the streets.
Okay.
No steel drums, no playing in front of the churches during services, on and on, stuff like that.
Yeah,
basic, decent rules. I still got that rule sheet somewhere, but that was great. It was great, and they were into it. I mean, people down there are just great that way.
So you went down. You were down there a couple weeks. Come back to Iowa Falls. Is that correct? Or
no? What did we do? Well, yeah. Oh yeah, the trip back out of New Orleans. Louisiana and the whole southern states and Mississippi. Why we went over there to cash this one girl's check she had, and it was one of those scenes right out of Easy Riders where rednecks are looking at us long hairs going, I was nervous. They gave us some runny grits and some bad cooked eggs, and we made it look like it was the best meal in the world. Back then it was still pretty tense between like long hairs and rednecks and
right.
And so you had to learn how to.
You said that was in 79, 80, somewhere around there.
79.
Okay. That was 45 years ago.
Was it?
Yeah.
Do the math.
Yeah.
And but made friends everywhere. But I remember going back north. I had a turtle on the dashboard, and we were in Rush's old gypsy wagon, and we went up through Branson. We had these dogs, and we were letting them out by this body of water. It was a river or something by this campground of all these older folks, and they called us right in. All of a sudden, there was cops everywhere around them. And you can't let your dogs run down here. And there's a campground about 30 miles up the road we think you ought to probably go to right there. And there's those are federal ducks there that your dogs are chasing. And Rush and I are looking at each other and go, what's a federal duck? And but there's tense moments where you learned how to gracefully extricate yourself from the situation, make peace.
Yeah,
you bet, officer. Whatever.
That's understandable.
Learn how to make friends and keep the peace. And don't get yourself in trouble and move on.
I think everybody pretty much got along back then within reason, and you always had the few that wanted to promote their own beliefs to a certain extent.
I had taken my folks once I was back in Iowa Falls. Once I took them to see Easy Rider.
Okay,
and that shook them up because especially where they got there was a couple scenes there but
So during that time, what were you doing for a living? Were you working other jobs, part-time jobs, and then playing music? Or
I always worked other jobs. I always had the guitar and the stuff, and I was learning some fiddle at the time too, and different stuff. And my mom's dad was a fiddler and a farmer, and 12 kids on the farm during the Depression. So I always had that fiddle. Was always apart and never fixed up. And another story there, becoming a fiddler and guitar. Always had that stuff with me. But, when your stomach growls, you got to do other stuff. I wasn't good enough to perform and do gigs yet. I was still learning, but here and there, I'm playing the streets, and you could earn some dough, and all that. No, it was a rough time. So I did a lot of house painting, and I did farm work, baling hay and all sorts of grunt farm work, taking care of livestock.
You told me about planting trees in the mountains one time. I think that you said you got a job doing some of that stuff. And
this is where my story, a lot of people get it a little wrong because I went to Canada with an old friend of mine from Aspen, Colorado. We took an old bus up there, and I said, I'm not going to dodge the draft. I'm
Yeah.
not doing that. That's not what I was doing. But they gave you like 6 months before you knew what was going to happen if you're for the selective service system, if you're going to go to war or not,
Sure.
So I was waiting for 6 to 8 months for this letter from back home, and I free to do whatever I wanted to do with my life. I said, I better go see the country because
Sure.
I might not be able to see it again ever. And,
So you were up. I think you told me
I
you
got
guys,
a job with the forestry, and I
that's
planted
awesome.
trees.
Yeah.
750,000 Douglas firs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that in BC?
British Columbia, yeah, the
Okay.
mountains. You look on the maps of British Columbia, it's one of the most beautiful places you'll ever go, still today. Mountains like you've never seen before, but the southern ranges of the Amanecas and the beautiful mountain ranges, yeah.
So you were up there, and I think you said, did you guys live in tents and stuff like that up there, or in a van, or whatever?
Yeah,
the case
no, we
be?
had
Always in the outdoors. That's
I lived
cool. Very
outdoors a
cool.
lot. Yeah, I think that's probably why I'm alive today because I'm a naturalist. I learned how to live by mountain creeks, and I don't know.
No,
I learned how to survive
yeah,
out
exactly.
of the
Yeah.
wilderness of cutting my own wood, snowshoes, skiing, living in the mountains,
Yeah.
going to get wood on snowshoes, hauling it back. I had an 8x10 sheep herder's tent. I had a teepee for a while and a couple of horses up in the mountains above Aspen, and
Really, out in Colorado.
yeah, that's before I
awesome.
ever went
Beautiful.
way up north.
Yeah.
But Aspen was a good part of me, and as far as my life and figuring out what I'm going to do at that age.
So when you went from
Before,
Aspen, you went up to BC, and then you came back. Did you come back to Iowa then?
yeah, I went back and forth all over the country for
Okay.
a number of years.
And when
I've
you
been out to California too, and from Iowa I went out, to Omaha, bounced over to Colorado and Aspen, met a lot of great people out there. I was there for a while. Then I went to California and worked out there in a health food restaurant, and I did a bunch of stuff out there. Then some people wanted to go to New Mexico, and I had the Volkswagen van. I got in Iowa City for $700, a long time ago, and I was traveling around the country there for a while on that. And I took some people down to New Mexico and went to Taos and lived around there for a while and met I hung around with the Taos Pueblo chief down there. An old Indian chief that he took a shine to me, and he just a good guy, neat old guy.
What town was that in?
Taos, New Mexico. Yeah,
New Mexico. I've never heard of that. I lived in the Southwest for a few years.
Taos is a great area, beautiful, and it's an old Taos Pueblo type settlement. It's been there for thousands,
right?
Or I don't know, many years. And the Taos Pueblo natives are really. I got to be good friends with the chief, and he asked me to go down to a Ute Indian Sundance once, or up, I guess, into Colorado, southern Colorado, the gnarliest country you ever seen. And I had the vehicle that could make it. And he came to me and says, "Will you take me up to this Sundance?" That was an important thing for me to do with an Indian chief because it was him and me, and I got him there.
He needed to get there. Yeah. What'd you learn from him? I mean,
I learned a lot of things. He used to come to the place I was at. I lived in a adobe little house out there outside of Taos by Ranchos de Taos for a while. And he'd come out there and he'd look at the sky and say, "It's going to rain about 2 o'clock this afternoon." And he was always right on.
Really?
He could read the weather just like nobody I'd ever known. And I learned a lot from that, but he drank peyote tea and stuff. It was just a natural thing for it's a cactus, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You learn stuff, but I think taking him to this event was really amazing for me because
And what
he got me in there. And
he was what kind of Indian?
Taos Pueblo.
Taos Pueblo, and you went to
It was a Ute Indian sun dance. Ute
Indian
is UTE,
yeah.
the reservation.
Mm-hmm.
The Ute, they had this, and all the Navajos and Utes and Taos Pueblo and all those indigenous tribes from around that area would converge there. Now, a Sundance is a big circular kind of event with a ring of trees, and in the middle of the whole ring of trees where the dancers come out of these little stalls and they dance forward to that. There's a buffalo skull on this on poles, and it's a ceremony where they used to hook talons into your chest, dig them in, and then you'd lean back against the rawhide strips until those things would rip out of your chest. And a lot of those, there was a rite of passage for that age, but it was.
Did you do that?
No, I wasn't part of that.
Okay,
but I was lucky to be there.
Remember the movie? Was it A Man Called Horse?
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah,
same thing. Yeah. The old guy I took there, his name was Tellus. Good Morning was his name, and he was kind of like a Chief Dan George kind of guy. Man, long braids, just the neatest old Indian. Drove an old Chevy truck, and he was a gardener. But that's who I drove there. And the minute I got there, he had told me all this ride up there, and I'm driving on roads that are just wide enough for the vehicle, and there's rattlesnakes everywhere, and that's some of the gnarliest country.
Cool,
scary,
cool. Yeah,
scary stuff. But when we got to this reservation, he says, "No, don't take any offense or anything." He says, "You're good to go here. You're okay here." But he says, "I'm going to be over that huge drum over there with those other chiefs sitting around that drum." And he went there. I didn't talk to him for 3 days. He drummed. He got there and he just sat down and started drumming, and he was there for the rest of the whole duration.
Okay.
And I was hanging with Navajo kids and different Indian young people and learning stories and stuff around campfires. And it was a great event, but that was significant to me because it was that. It brought up my native blood in me that I have from my dad's side, which were, they came from Mexico in 1915. They walked up from Guanajuato to Mason City, Iowa.
Your dad was born in what year?
Dad was born in 21.
Okay.
My mom was
born in 25. So his parents came up in 1915 is what you said.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. They were migrants, but they naturalized and they raised a family in
whereabouts? Like where did they stop to build roots?
Well, they stopped all along the way. There was a long trek. They walked,
correct?
Yeah, my grandfather and my grandmother and my grandmother's parents also.
Okay. So where did your dad grow up at then?
He grew up in Mason City, Iowa.
So they come all the way to Iowa. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
okay.
my grandparents they worked in the fields and they did bean fields, the field work. They worked their way up to Iowa because my grandparents used to tell me through their village and stuff. They saw Jesus Arraza, Zapata, Pancho Villa. They would ride through these things on horseback, these little towns, and kidnap a few young girls, bring them back. But they were revolutionaries, and so that's probably where I get a lot of my spirit is from. Is
cool.
Those days. But my great grandmother would hide my grandmother to keep her from getting kidnapped by these revolutionaries. But they did. They eventually got out of there and said it was just too tough survival wise, and so they decided to come north, and they heard to work in Iowa for other people.
So that's how everything ended up with you guys, your mom and your dad getting together in that area over there in central Iowa and what have you. So,
Yeah. Well, both my folks are from Mason City. Mom
Okay.
grew up south Mason City on the farm with the 12 brothers and sisters, and depression and tough times. I mean, burn chunks of coal, no TVs or anything like that yet. Radio maybe.
Yeah. I know I've heard stories from my dad
Very
about that
simple,
too when they
humble
got the
beginnings.
first TV and the radio shows, and I think that's why I enjoy listening to so many things, because I'd rather listen than watch. I mean,
Yeah.
it's and I mean,
Listening just comes into you, and
yeah.
you don't have to pay attention, and it's just there. And
Tell me about music styles. Let's go into, since I've known you, I would say, Denny, I need a blues band, and a blues band would show up. Denny, I need a rock band, and a rock band would show up. And my favorite, Denny, I want some folk music, which I could listen to you play forever. And so
that's my real roots, man.
Is is that your favorite? The folk music?
It's the most real that encountered my life. One thing I wanted to tell you, that you asked me how I got really into that phase of music in those couple of years. I studied English and stuff, the language arts and stuff, but state speech contests came along where some of us students could go to, can't remember what town it was even in, but bus trip to state speech contest. Right. It was a big deal, And I did interpretive prose and poetry, which means you get up and you read your thing. You have to use a thing to read off of, and perform this in front of judges and a crowd.
Okay.
And read stuff. And Bob Dylan had just burst upon the scene in his first couple of years of being heard of and known. Midwestern guy, from Minnesota. And I was totally into him right from the start. I go, man, this guy's got some words. He knows. I trusted his things he said, no matter what he said. And the judges had never heard of him. And I was first kid up there to read Bob Dylan to him. I'm up there, hard rain's going to fall, and all other stuff is the first stuff. And who is this Mr. Dylan, Dennis? And I said, that's Bob Dylan. And Zimmerman, well, it was a whole beginning of a phase of that words actually meant stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you string them together right, other people are going to maybe learn something from you, because you can weave thoughts. And that's why I discovered that folk music was the most real thing for me, to just, this is the way I was naturally. I could talk to people.
Tell a story.
I go
through a song.
I love to tell stories and relate my adventures, and that's how you learn how to do that, is to formulate.
It takes a talented person to do that, as far as I'm concerned. I can talk with people, and I can talk in front of people, but to put a good story together is, unless it's just flowing out of me, it's not something that's real easy for me to do. And I've heard your songs in the past, and that's why I like them so much, and it means something to me. And they're the river songs and the frog songs and the mosquito songs and what have you. All the things you sing about is, it's. I have a full list of your songs on my my old iPod.
Yeah, and I appreciate that about you. Our friendship has always been based around just the real thing, and we never let the rest of the world really bug us too much about anything, because life's too short, for a lot of this stuff. And that's what I love about it, and you talk about, before I met you, in 1984, let's say, I'll pick a year, I was living up in Eau Claire, working at a New Delhi. My good friend Piano Bob was alive, and great piano player, and him and I played together a lot, and we built this place up there called the New Delhi up in Eau Claire. And it's a great performance place, food, and we had music every week of different great people from across the country. I could rattle them off, but great people. And we got better at playing and everything. And we hired this one guy come along, a guy named Larry Long, and he's still around. And Mississippi River Revival was a organization that came to be at those times where he came to me and he said, Danny, we're going to do this river trip. And we're going to go to the headwaters or the Lake Itasca, where the Mississippi begins in that area. Do this canoe flotilla and pick up garbage and stuff that shouldn't be there on the banks and in the river. Clean up the river. And it was a noble cause. And
this was what year? 84?
84. That's the first year. And it had started a few years before that. But I said, yeah, that sounds like something I want to do. And so I sold a guitar amp and I sold some stuff just to get enough money to get up there I was driving this old ambulance at the time, actually. And I showed up with a canoe on top and this ambulance. That was a sight. And I had this big dog, Pogo, that was looked like a bear sitting there with me. And anyway, I canoed from the headwaters all the way down to past Bellevue to really, that summer, and I got bonded with the river that way. I mean, I got hypothermia, I got sick, I got well, I got strong, I got wet, I got rained on and hailed on and all sorts of stuff, and seen wolves off to the side of my canoe, had my dog jump out and had to go backtrack and find him, and an adventure like nothing else. And I thought, boy, if Mark Twain could only see me now, but well, I don't know. That's where you really get convinced of what you can do, and the stories just come out of you.
Right.
What you were wondering about, where's that folk music come from? I said, well, like the Mosquito Rag song, I wrote that up in Bemidji. But there's about 40 kids that they'd never heard anybody sit down with them, play guitar on a porch out in the sunshine, out by a house. Down to earth as you can get. And had this whole yard full of kids sitting out there in front of me, and I got to think of what to do. So I made something up. And I said, well, what should we sing about, And I said, and they're all going, well, suggestions, and everybody was, mosquitoes up there, like, wow, mosquitoes.
Like barn swallows in Iowa.
Geez, not only big, but lots of them. You look across the lake and it's just like, anyway, a cloud. And let's think about mosquitoes. And so I got all these kids that sounded like mosquitoes and doing the sound effects during the song. And I just made up these verses about swatting and a grab and doing that mosquito rag.
Did you record that? I mean, meaning at that point in time with the kids there, did you have anybody that was catching that? Or
no, I just memorized it and wrote it down later, kind of thing.
I just didn't know. I know you told me that story before.
It's a true story. I remember doing it right now. And all these kids just got the biggest kick out of that because they'd never heard really a guy like me come on big, I am what I am. I think Popeye said that. Anyway, these kids, I realized that I had a good connection with kids and music, and that was just a great thing. I've seen a lot of kids grow up around me doing that thing, and I've gotten older and everything, and these kids have grown up and learned how to play themselves or something, and that's what Pete Seeger used to call the folk music process, the folk process, where it just happens on its own.
Right.
But to those people that have that spirit, you can put it together and use your smarts and
that's awesome.
Write it down.
When did you land in Dubuque?
Right around there. Actually, when I canoed the Mississippi from the headwaters from Itasca, that's a lot of stuff there. And I tell you, rain and then living in a hammock along the river, keep off the ground and tents, and great time, but also hardcore. You had to. Plus, the river is dangerous. I mean, you're in a canoe, you capsize or get squeezed between a barge and the cliffs or something, you're gonna die. And so surviving that adventure is one thing, but on the way down to the river, you're going through everything. Every river town, we did a little concert gathering and put all the garbage and stuff that we'd flotsam out of the river. We'd put it there to be recycled by that town. I said, this is stuff we got in your section of the river.
Yeah.
Tires, refrigerators, old cars, just junk that's, at the river.
Yeah. That the river washes away.
The water goes low. You see all the stuff that's down there,
Yeah.
Anyway, So every river town along the whole Mississippi down to, this area, but before that comes along, and I'd met people that were coming up from Dubuque or something and canoeing, getting in on this flotilla, and saying, Danny, we need a guy like you around Dubuque. Why don't you land there?
When you landed there, what year was that?
84.
84.
Yeah. Same year I worked with elephants in a circus out of my hometown.
That's 41 years, yeah.
A lot happened that year. I'd been back to visit my dad in Iowa Falls and on the farm, and circus was coming to town. This is a good part of the story, is that I said, oh, man, circus. It's the Ford Brothers Circus from Cut and Shoot, Texas. They're up, and they're traveling around this ragtag bunch of semis with elephants and giraffes and a hippo, and just a small circus run by a Vietnam veteran that had survived and gotten back. And he said, if I ever get out of here, I'm going to start a little circus.
Yeah.
So he got his best gal. She was the big cat and high wire girl. Did other stuff too, but they hauled this little circus around all over, and they came up through my hometown there, Iowa Falls, and they were playing all around, Eagle Grove, and all those little towns around there. And it was right down. They set up right down from my dad's farm, and I went down there with my dog and watched them set up with elephants and big tents and tigers, and it was a big circus. But I got into that the same year.
Really?
So it was a great spring and summer. I did the circus. I worked with them for a while. Went all around up over in here in Wisconsin and the Hazel Green, and worked with elephants. I got to work with 12 elephants.
Really?
And so that was a fun part of that summer. But canoe in the Mississippi happened right around and after that, and I met the Bright Box, and I met a bunch of the great people that were just raising kids and having a good time, and they're involved in the river thing, and they got me to come around here and stick around. And I met all the Bellevue people, just bunch of great friends, and they know who they are, and helped me out. And
so
Mississippi band tracked me down on Central.
Okay.
And I had met them at the last river festival in Bellevue down there. They were playing. I was doing my solo folky thing and then playing fiddle with a few other people. And they liked what I did musically. And they came up to me and said, hey, you want to try to be in the band? Actually, Cricket chased me down on Central in my ambulance. And we talked, and he said, you want to maybe try a little stint with us and see how it goes, and we need somebody because they had lost a couple of members, and I said I'll give it a whirl, see how. This is 84, and we're still doing it as of last week. A couple of spaces.
So we're in April of 2025, and I saw you play at Knickers about 3 weeks ago. Same band.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
same four-piece, I joined.
Yeah.
And we had our ups and downs, but really we've come out, I get a little emotional about it, I guess. We had a lot of ups and downs, and but the music was always cool, and we just did it anyway, even if we were getting a little funny with each other. But we worked that out. And I begged them, and I got fired a few times, and but we all kissed and made up, kind of thing. And they're good guys. They're really good, and we've learned about each other, and we realized that we're the guys that kept trooping it out.
Sure.
The bigger picture for the greater good to me was playing for everybody, playing for all these great people.
But ever since I've known you, that's all you've done. You know, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah,
and it hasn't been that long. It's been about 20 years, but
yeah.
you know, I admire that lifestyle. You know,
Well, yeah. It's
it's
not an easy lifestyle either. I
yeah,
mean,
I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's you.
it
You know
is
what I'm
me, and
saying?
a lot of people say, "Well, you got to have a regular job, and you got to have a day job and everything." I had a lot of day
Uh,
jobs, and I worked as hard as anybody in a lot of different things. I just didn't want to do that regular 9 to 5
day in, day out.
trapped in the
Yeah,
thing. I
yeah.
can't do that. I tried it, and it's just not me. And I've had a great adventure living my life. It's been a lot of hard things and difficult periods and whatnot. But I've known every kind of person there is to know, and old folks and little kids and everybody in between. And I'm just kind of a universal folk singer kind of guy too. That I learned, I got to meet a lot of the real neat old people when they were alive.
Yeah.
Muddy
Well,
Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Elizabeth Cotton, all the old black blues singers and other folk singers, regular other, on and on.
I'd like to play some of your music, and I'd like to put a song in here. And then when we come back, I want to go through a couple of different things.
Yeah, I visited that old statue of Blackhawk in my hometown when I was a kid, overlooking the Iowa River. Well, I read of the things that he did. Yes, I read of the things that he did. A little plaque with a story told briefly of a haunting and Midwestern tale. It would stick with me always. I could hear a far distant wail. I could hear a far distant wail. Hey, 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 I could hear thunder when I muttered his name. The wind would kick up and swirl. The rains in the night, the lightning of light, the cries of the boys and the girls. Yeah, the cries of the boys and the girls. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Of leather and horse and moccasin worn, hungry naked skins that are torn. Loving the land, taking a stand, blood in the grooves of the corn. Oh, there's blood in the grooves of the corn. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, hey, hey. Summer winds are rolling in, the clouds will show us the way. Babies are born, spirits forlorn, our feet are bloody and thin. Our feet, they are bloody and thin. Now I must chip some arrowheads and tie my feathers on. Travel far, heal these scars, most of us have gone. Yeah, most of us have gone. Hey, 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 hey. Oh, Yes, I'd visit that old statue of Blackhawk in my hometown when I was a kid, overlooking the Iowa River. Oh, I read of the things that he did. Yeah, I read of the things that he did.
All righty, we're back after that great song.
Yeah, that was the dandy.
Yeah.
I got more of those. I hope.
Tell me about instruments. I've been in your house and I've seen a fiddle. I've seen a multitude of guitars. You know, my favorite banjo. My favorite's a slide guitar. I love it when you play that. But tell me. I mean, the harmonica. I've seen you play the harmonica while you're banging on a guitar at the same time and what have you. But tell me about your instruments and tell me about fixing instruments. I've seen you down at your place. If some of you don't know, Denny lives right down on the Mississippi River in a cabin
right down the hill from here,
just down the hill from where we're sitting right now, and he might be fixing a big old bass thing or whatever. You know, I'm not good with the instruments, but I've seen him with a multitude of instruments down there that he's fixing up for people. And let's talk about what you play and what you like to do and what you fix.
Yeah, it all revolves around glue and clamps and strings, and that wood comes apart at the seams through age and weathering and whatnot. And like I was telling you earlier about my grandfather, my mom's dad. He was a farmer in the Depression. 12 kids, grandma and him. They made it happen somehow. A beautiful kind of thing. I never knew him, knew grandma, but you know, that fiddle, we always had it. His fiddle, and
is that the one you play now?
No, I got a mess of fiddles, but that one was always pretty special. I kept it, and it'd come and go out of repair a lot, and it was never really set up right until I learned how to fix fiddles better. It just waited for me to come around, but that's just a good old fiddle.
Remember the one that my dad brought over for you to fix up?
Oh yeah,
that did barn dances back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
1850s, 1860s.
That's what fascinates me about like the violin, especially because a lot of them, they sit and wait for you in a case for many years in an attic or somewhere, and preserved. Hopefully, a lot of them make it. Some of them don't. They come apart. If they come apart, I learned how to put them back together with hide glue and make my own hide glue.
Okay.
You know,
what is hide glue?
Hide glue is made from hide, like steer hide, cows. You boil down the hides, and that's sticky liquid you get out of there.
Okay.
That's the glue, basically. Okay. But you can dry it into granules and then take those granules. You can buy it, you know, and take, you know, a certain amount, and you heat it to a certain temperature, and that's glue. You heat it a few times.
You heat it up.
You heat it up to a certain temperature, and that's the oldest glue known to people. I mean, since time began and people were fixing stuff, they learned that if you boiled down stuff, you did the sticky stuff.
You end up with that,
Yeah. And that's the original hide glue. Now there's plenty of different kind of glues out there and all that. But as far as fixing stuff, it came from that I always wanted to hear my grandpa's fiddle play again, and I had to learn how to fix fiddles. But my first guitars and stuff, something would always mess up where the strings go over something. Something's always buzzing or something not right. And so I learned how to just eliminate buzzes or things, or make the action a little better to play on, so your fingers don't hurt so much. Or
right.
I remember my mom, when she was still alive, she said, "Denny, how'd you learn to do all that stuff? How'd you learn to fix stuff like that?" I go, "One little thing at a time, Mom." It was like just learn how to fix one little thing at a time. And guitars, fiddles, all those wooden stringed instruments, it's all basically kind of similar, because you got to rejoin seams and places where they're coming apart at the seams, and clamp it all down and let it dry and clean it all up, make it look nice. And I learned how to save instruments from certain doom, or the scrap pile.
I've seen you do it.
Big stand-up basses, you just got to think bigger.
Yeah.
I like them because you got bigger parts. Now, fiddles, I got to get teeny and, do little things. I'm dropping stuff. And it's like, I'm a big guy. And so I got to think small at times. But so, yeah, I fixed everything I've ever had along the way just to keep it going,
Well, we were, when you got done with that song, we were chatting before we came back in here. You were telling me about playing a slide guitar in the Bahamas. Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, when I lived in British Columbia, I worked for the forestry, and I built a health food restaurant up there in Vancouver by Stanley Park, and God's Kitchen, we called it. Where was I?
So we were talking about playing the slide in the Bahamas.
Well, the slide.
And you said
okay. A friend of mine out there, a good buddy, he played conga drums. He's just a good guy. he had a bus at the time. We bummed around in and played for people all over the place. Well, he was from Nassau originally. Grew up down there in the main island of Nassau, and his family was down there. Well, he took me down there to just play some music. He said, "Hey, Denny, you want to go down to Nassau? I got to see my other friends down there, and his sister lived down there." So, yeah, we flew down to Nassau. We're from Vancouver. We flew across Canada, Edmonton, I believe in the Toronto, and then south down to Florida. Then you hop, skip, and jump down to, on an older, rickety, bumpier plane, down to Nassau. And I remember coming out of the mountains, and I was dressed like a mountain man for cold weather. And I get out of the plane in Nassau, and it's just hot as can be. And my buddy Oaks, his beautiful sister shows up in this Jeep to pick us up at the airport, and I go, "Holy cow! Oh, look at her!" It's one of those kind of things. I said, "This is going to be a good trip." He got us playing in a few different places. He took me down there to play some music. I took my I got in a 12-string electric dobro in Vancouver, some music shop. Long before that, and it's electric 12-string dobro. That came after Nationals, but they were American made in California.
Okay.
The Dobros is Dopera Brothers. The name came from that, and they made these kind of resonator guitars, slide.
Okay.
They're a resonator guitar.
Uh-huh.
The thing that the slide you're talking about is.
What does resonator mean? I don't even know.
Well, the resonator, like the National that you've seen me play a lot, that old National, that was the forerunner of everything and all that. They called it an ampliphonic resonator because they had the metal plate on the front of the guitar, but you take that metal plate off of there, and there's this spun, really lightweight aluminum cone in there. It's kind of shaped to fit that hole. It sits down the hole on the wooden little platform there, and then the bridge comes in the middle of that plate and that thing. Well, that little piece of metal, it was a whole other design than the regular acoustic guitar, because acoustic guitars were getting drowned out at all the parties of the early times when people would get together and play.
Yeah.
You couldn't hear the guitar, so they brainstormed this way to make a guitar louder, and the ampliphonic resonator became the resonator guitar. It was just louder, and it could hold its own at a party or whatever, and it had a peculiar sound too, but nice sound, awesome sound. But it was invented out of that spun cone that would amplify that sound. Different than just a box guitar, right? So, yeah, it came to be that. And the one I have came about from me playing an old Gibson acoustic guitar in an old girlfriend's living room. And this kid was over. I didn't know him. He must have known her or something. But he's sitting there listening to me. He's looking at this old Gibson, this acoustic guitar, round hole, regular box guitar. And he says, my mom's got this old guitar up in the attic, he says, but it's got this metal thing on the front of it. And he didn't know what it was. He didn't think twice about it. He just told me about it out of the blue. He's listening to me play. And once he said there's a metal thing screwed on the front, I stand up. I said, I got to see this guitar. Yeah. Your mother has it? Come on, And I knew what it was. I knew what it must be if it's got metal on the front of it.
Right.
And I didn't know this kid. And before he took off, and the gal I was with at the time, I said, I got to find that kid, and I got to go talk to his mother. I want to see this guitar. She's apparently got an attic, and it's been up there for decades. She got it new in the 30s. It's a 36. So we went over to her house. I found her where she lived up on Kane Street in Dubuque here. And old lady, this guy's mother. And, she knew we were coming, and she greeted us and came in, served us up some tea, and we talked about things. And, she knew I was there to see that guitar. Well, once I got there, I watched this old lady go up into their attic, up these stairs, and rustled around for a little bit. She came back down to this old chipboard guitar case and helped her, but put it on the kitchen table right there and flipped open the lid. My jaw hit the table. I go, are you kidding me? It was one of those things. Must have that guitar, and it had been up there for decades, and they had left the strings on it, so the neck was a little, I always tell people, loosen your strings if you're going to store a guitar, especially in an attic. So anyway, I'm looking at this guitar, and I just flabbergasted. There's a wooden National. There's the metal Nationals, which were made out of brass and nickel plated and stuff. And during the war years, they cut back on the metals. They needed metals for munitions and whatnot. But so the wooden National, this is a Trojan model. Beautiful old guitar. And she said, I've had this since it was new. And picking her brain about the story of where she got it and all this. And but she got it, and she learned to play some. And she said, well, when I start a family, I want them to learn how to play this. And so time went by, but she told me she had to sell it for 10 years. She got a pair of nursing shoes by selling that guitar. And 10 years later, she says she was going down the street somewhere and she saw a guy with a shopping cart, poor, tough times. She recognized the guitar case with all his belongings. She went up and got the guitar back.
Wow.
Which was cool in itself. But
only if that guitar could talk, right?
yeah, and what it did in its life. Yeah. Oh, I've often thought that. I wish this thing could talk. But anyway, she got it back, and that's how she kept it for the rest of her life. And when she had a family, nobody learned how to play, I guess, she said. And so she stored it up in the attic.
Yeah.
Been up there ever since till I come along, which was a long time. It was, whatever. But if that one of her kids wouldn't have heard me play that other guitar in another place,
never known it was there.
Never would have connected. Yeah. And once he said it had a metal thing on the front of it, I knew. And so I spent the next couple of weeks trying to talk her out of it. I mean, she knew I wanted it. I said, "Well, you sell me that guitar, I'll play it for everybody. I'll take good care of it. I'll record with it. I'll do anything I can with it that I can do." And well, I'll have to think about it and see what I think it's worth and everything. And so give me a couple of weeks. And she was just so sweet about it. I can't remember her name or anything, but anyway, I went back and kept at her. And she said, "Yeah, I arrived at a price. I'd be glad to sell it to you because you seem the most sincere, Dennis." And so, I was just happy. I got together the dough that she wanted and got it. And it's been with me ever since. That was quite a while ago. It was in the 90s somewhere.
I've heard many songs off that guitar.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed them all.
Yeah, well, it's just got that thing. And when I was younger, I started playing slide guitar because I always liked just that sound. And you were wondering how I ever came upon slide guitar. And I had to think about that, but one of my high school teachers when I was still in high school, my English teachers, him and his wife were teachers in Iowa Falls at the high school there. Great people. Pat and Joy Boyd. And they used to have some of us students over to their house and just because they were cool people. And, but he had an old Nashville hanging on the wall.
Really? And
he had these old blues records that I'd never... That's where I first got into it. Some old Lonnie Johnson and some all these just old great black blues guys that would play slide guitar. And I thought, man, that's just the greatest thing. I don't know.
You like the sound
piqued
too.
My interest, and besides regular guitar. And I said, how do you do that? And these old boys were, bottleneck guitar, you've heard of that. Yeah. Well, that came from where you'd take an old wine bottle because most old guitar players, they drank, and wine bottles, you'd take the neck and you'd tie a string around it and soak it in kerosene or something. You'd tie a string around it and you'd burn that string and you could snap the neck off. Right. And then I'd take it on some cement,
file it down
a little bit to keep it from getting cut, and that was your bottleneck slide. Mm-hmm. Now they started making them, mass producing them eventually once people got on to playing slide guitar. But no, I started out in regular. I broke wine bottles to get my slides, or used a butter knife, or lipstick tubes they used to have, and stuff like that. Piece of bone. And that's how you get started on that. It was humble beginnings, I tell you what. And but anyway, that guitar still with me, right upstairs.
So the other guitars you have, like any stories about them, where you got them, or how old they are, or anything like that? I mean,
yeah. Well, they all got a story. Every one of them has
like
a story.
You've been carrying it for years,
Yeah,
in a good way.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably tough on guitars. I've worn out a lot of them, because I can fix them, I can always restore them. And there's wear spots on guitars that you ain't getting around. I mean, look at Willie Nelson's guitar. Yeah. It's that as an example. You do wear them.
Sure.
Wear holes in them. They come apart. You fix them, and you just beautiful old guitars. You just keep them because of the sound, and they have a lot of sentimental value. That's the height of sentimental value to me, is all the music that's run through those instruments.
Nice.
Those stories are still trapped in there.
Yeah,
I think.
I agree.
They're in there. Yeah.
Well, Tell
got to
me.
believe in the mystical part of music before any of it happens.
Oh, I
and
believe.
you trust in your
Yeah.
brain and your memory and your heart.
Makes the heart feel good.
Yeah.
Music does, you know. It's the stories that are told, and that's I like the songs with good stories in them. And
yeah, well,
you
it's genuine.
Yeah.
You know, you can't fluff that stuff. It's the real deal, and you can't. Your imagination can't go beyond the reality of some of that stuff. You know.
Well, Denny, let's talk about, as I called it, the slowdown. It seems like in the last 20 years, you and I have both slowed down a little bit. And
Yeah.
what's in the future for you? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You just going to play till that day?
Yeah. Well, living out here along the Mississippi River, you know, having you as a neighbor one has been a good thing, you know, and your family watching them. You got a good thing going, and know who your friends are and all that. But living out along the river here really helped me. I always wanted to live along a river in a little humble cabin with wood smoke coming out the chimney, you know. And I've lived in the mountains, so learn how to live by wood fires. And uh, you know, there's a lot of time to think and do. And I've been playing, well, you know, a Mississippi band all the way along, you know, and some breaks in that, you know, when we were apart and all that. And I just kept doing my own music because that's what I do. And so I'm okay. When changes come along, I always got my own songs that I've written and I feel good about, you know, and sharing them with people anytime, anywhere, any time of day. And I don't know.
Well,
I write. I want to do
career.
a songbook. I want to do a songbook of all the songs that I feel are worth saving and sharing. And so that's what I'm working on now. I got, you know, I got them all written. Everything I've got written.
I called it a career. I think it was a life. You know.
Yeah, it is.
I never looked at you as a career musician. Yeah. It was your life, and that's all there was to it.
And I can't explain it any better than that either. Really, I had to do this because I'm me, and I have my own peculiarities, but they all come from back in school when you're younger. You know, I was in the skits and I did high school plays, and I had to memorize a lot of stuff. I memorized the whole play and everybody's part besides my own, you know, so I trained my mind to remember stuff.
Yeah.
You know, have a good memory, and you can train your brain, I guess. Either that or I just got a good memory. I don't know. I'm quirky, but I say what I got, and I have to go back and relearn some of my songs at times. You know, go over the verses, and that's why it's good to write them all down. And for me, I got enough songs that I should have a songbook because. So that's one of the projects I'm working on as far as what you're talking about, and I'll be 76 in April here. And like I was telling you, that's when my dad passed on, and I was with him when he died. You know, and I should talk about this. I'll get choked up. But you know, 76 is a long time. It's 3/4 of a century, and I've outlived so many of my close friends and relatives. But some of my close friends around here, man, it gets you, you know. And I mean, people I played with a lot, you know, and they're close to. I mean, blood, sweat, and tears kind of people. And so, and I you know, and my mom was still alive, and she's in the home and things, and I hanging with her as much as I could. And she says, "Denny, why am I still around? Why am I still alive?" She was the last one of her 12 brothers and sisters to die.
Yeah.
And I said, "I don't know, Mom. They say the best for last, I guess, you know."
Yeah,
I don't really know. It's like your old man, you know. He's a great guy.
My dad's still around. I asked him a while back. I said, "Is it a blessing or a curse?" And he goes, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Being the last of all your friends, you know." I said, "Because you go through all that heartache of those people passing on, and I've seen him go from playing cards with the guys his age to now he's playing cards with guys that are 20 years younger than him, and they're old, you know."
Yeah.
But No, well, I think we'll get ready to wrap this thing up. And you got anything you want to tell anybody? You got anything you want to say?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I could go for hours with somebody like you that I could bounce off of
Sure.
that understands me a little better than some friends. But it's like when I get to go out on your boat, out on the Mississippi River, south or north, and play for all those people on the boat.
Yeah.
That means a lot to me because I am at home on the river.
Well, they enjoy it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm comfortable there, and my mind doesn't quit. When I'm playing, I just keep on a roll, and the river, I just there with it, and that's one of my favorite things to do.
Sure.
But I've played in every other situation on the side of mountains, and in middle of huge crowds, and governors standing around, and different important people or whatever, and you have to keep your focus of what music you present to people, and the material is important to me because I'm not a poppy guy. I like talking about real things in this world that mean a lot to me. And I'm not trying to be the most right guy about everything in this world situation that we're in. It's just a big world, and it's survived us. It's survived people all this time, and the world's going to be okay without us. And it's also, it's just time to reevaluate your life, everybody's life, and do what you feel is best. And
well, I'd like to end this thing. I have two requests. I want to end it with you playing the slide guitar for 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I want you to write a song about the frog that ate my favorite catfish. So that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Frogs. Frogs and catfish. The last story just pops into my head about taking a canoe trip from out of Eau Claire down the Eau Claire River, down the Chippewa River, out to the Mississippi.
Yeah.
It was a long canoe trip, and it was just some of my good friends, and Piano Bob being one of them, and we'd fish off the side of the canoe when we were canoeing throughout the day and everything, and he hooked into this biggest, ugliest catfish you ever seen. I'd never seen maybe an uglier catfish. It was white and spotted and just weird looking, different colors. And just, I go, is that a catfish? But he got it, and we were going to throw it on the fire later that night. And, we got back and found our campsite and tied off the canoes and everything. And Bob left that catfish on a stringer over the side of the boat for breakfast in the morning or something.
Sure.
Well, I'm in the tent and I'm sleeping in the morning, and I hear them out wrestling around the campsite, and because Denny must have took the canoe out there and gone fishing or something because it's gone. And I go, no, I'm still here, man. From the tent, I go, no, I'm still here. And they say, oh, geez. The canoe must have worked itself loose in high water in the night, and it did.
Yeah.
So I hear them take off in a couple of canoes and go down and try to find this canoe that's lost with this fish hanging on the side of it. Well, they said they went a couple miles downstream, and they saw the canoe floating out in the middle of the current. The fishing pole that we had as a night line just to catch something in the night was hooked against the side of the canoe on an eyelet of the fishing pole, and all the string was out, all the fishing line, and that's all that was holding that canoe from going all the way to New Orleans, I guess. But the fish was still on the line.
Really?
So we did eventually eat it. I felt kind of bad for the catfish going, but things like that are those stories that were saved. And I had a newspaper article at the time. Every week I wrote for a column for this newspaper, and that was one of the stories that everybody liked because what are the odds?
Finding the canoe, let alone the fish still being on.
Yeah. So I would say the river and good friends, that's what I got. That's what I got.
About.
That's where my heart's at. I got stories endless stories that I can always come up with, and I'll play a slide guitar till the cows come home. But fiddling. I spent years playing and learning old timey fiddle tunes, just individual fiddle tunes. Chicken Reel, Flop Eared Mule, Soldier's Joy, Jerusalem Ridge. Every fiddle tune is different, and you learn that as a complete unit. So you got this storage of individual fiddle tunes that you can always whip out, or you learn how to play the fiddle along with other people and make up stuff. So it all has its place.
I agree.
That's where I'm at, and I'm fortunate that I took the time to learn a bunch of different instruments. The banjo, and I got onto that. It was given to me by a guy that flew back to Japan. It was too heavy for him to fly with, so he left it for the next guy, and I was the next guy. So that's how I got one of those banjos. And just every instrument comes to you in a different way, and or else I see it there. I gotta have that one.
Yeah.
And it's music fulfills my whole life, and so I'm thankful for people that like what I do, and if they don't like it, well, too bad. That's what I do. And, so you got to stand strong.
All right,
so
Denny.
thanks for.
We're going to wrap it up. Thank you for everything.
Yeah. All right.